Greetings from Hopalong Hollow. This is Jerry. Today I'm going to start a series that is going to go all the way through December about an Edwardian Christmas. So I'm going to do several episodes, each having to do with the time period between 1901 and 1914. Between the Victorian era and the beginning of World War I was a brief period of time in which there was a great deal of prosperity and many, many changes throughout the world. And this period of time was known as the Edwardian era. Now, King Edward was on the throne, and there was much going on throughout the world. Now, in America, obviously, we did not have a king. In America, from the time after the Civil War through about 1920, was known as the Gilded Age. I don't really like to call it the Gilded Age because it was only gilded for a select few of elite people who became millionaires and billionaires during that time. I prefer the Edwardian era. And another reason I want to do an Edwardian Christmas is because we live in an Edwardian house. Our house was built somewhere between 1898 and 1912. We've never quite figured out the exact date. But because I live in an Edwardian house, it's kind of interesting for me to think of what would things have been like during that era in this house. How would they have decorated? What would they have read? So we're going to talk about different ways to decorate, different foods to eat. We're going to use old cookbooks from the early 20th century. We're going to read storybooks from that period of time, and we're going to do a lot of wonderfully fun decorations for the tree and the house that they would have done during that period. It's actually going to be fun for me because our house, most of the things that I collect, the antiques in this house, are actually from that period. I have a few things that are much older, but most of the antiques and the kitchenware and the furniture are all between 1880 and 1920. So I'll be able to use authentic items in order to do the cooking, which I always do anyway, and authentic books from that time period. Many of the authors of that time that were very famous: Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes series, Joseph Conrad, A Room with a View, The Heart of Darkness, G.K. Chesterton, another famous author. It was a time when there was great wealth and prosperity, but it was also a time when there was a lot of social changes. For example, child labor laws were introduced, which was great because children were not going to be allowed to work in the coal mining industry at 5 years old or become chimney sweeps at such young ages. It was a time of much prosperity for some and not so much for others. But we are going to do this as a middle-class family in a middle-class home, and it's going to be, I think, kind of interesting because you don't see too many videos about Edwardian Christmases. A lot of Victorian Christmases. In fact, I've done Victorian Christmas. We're going to start out, though, pretty simple, in an unfussy way. We're going to make something for the house to scent this house, to scent up this old house with the smell and the sense of Christmas by making some cinnamon, unedible ornaments. So let's get into the kitchen and start that right away. I'm going to start out by filling the home with the scent of an Edwardian Christmas. And we're going to do that by adding the scents in the air of cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger. But we're not baking cookies. We're baking something a little more permanent here, something that you could also use as an ornament. We're going to use these throughout the entire house to scent the house for an entire month or longer. We are going to be making cinnamon applesauce ornaments, and we're going to be using these springly molds. These molds would have been available to the Edwardians because these molds, actually, the design of these molds dates back to the 1600s, and in many homes these are collector's items passed on from generation to generation. But of course, you could use any kind of cookie cutter as well. Now let me state first of all that I'm not telling you that Edwardian people would have been making these ornaments. Right now we're just trying to get into the mood and the scent of Christmas in that time period. Before we begin, I want to show you what I found blooming in the garden today. These very few flowers, but here we are the day before Thanksgiving, November 26th. Or is it the 27th? Not sure. But look at that. I found these just scattered throughout the garden. We've actually got black-eyed Susan, some daisies, some little forget-me-nots, and two beautiful blooms of Bathsheba rose. Look at that. In November. Amazing. So we will enjoy those as we make our ornaments. Our ingredients for these ornaments are 1 cup of cinnamon, ground cinnamon, 1 cup of applesauce. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of white Elmer's glue, 1 tablespoon of cloves, and 1 tablespoon of nutmeg. First thing we're going to do is going to mix the applesauce with the 2 tablespoons of glue and blend it very, very well. In the meantime, while you're doing this, get your oven preheated to 200. You're not really going to be baking these. You're just going to be drying them very slowly in the oven. That way it cuts down on the drying time rather than air drying them. But you could do it either way. I'm going to be using one of my old Yellowware bowls that's pretty cracked and stained. Not great for using for actually cooking food, but fine for crafts. So I'm starting with my applesauce. Next, we're going to put in our 2 tablespoons of glue. I'm going to mix this really well. Now, 1 tablespoon of nutmeg. 1 tablespoon of cloves. I'm wearing these vinyl gloves because I know this is going to get very sticky. Mix the spices together. Okay, we're going to mix our dry ingredients together. Smells so great. Now the reason I know these last and last and last for a long time is when I lived in Colorado, I belonged to an art co-op in Larimer Square, which was kind of a revived art community, restored, kind of quaint little shopping area. I don't know what it's like now. It's been a long time since I've been there. But there was one woman that was a member of this co-op that made these ornaments to sell in the shop. And that shop always smelled just delicious like this. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger. Now, I'm not quite sure how many ornaments we're going to get out of this. Might have to do it twice or double the recipe. I think it's good though to start with a very small mix. Now we're going to mix these 2 together. And we're going to end up kneading these with our hands in a few minutes to form sort of like a dough ball. Also, you're going to need a little more cinnamon because you're going to kind of dust your cookie molds so they don't get stuck. And you're going to dust your cutting board or wherever you're going to lay your dough. If the dough gets too stiff, you can always add a few drops of water. I'm about to turn this out on the cutting board, so I'm going to sprinkle it lightly with cinnamon. We don't want to get stuck on the board. Now I'm going to, ooh, well, I still have a lot of cinnamon there. Look at all that. Yeah, you definitely have to mix this with your hands. Okay. Okay, we're going to knead it with our hands until it's mixed up really nicely. Now we're going to take our dough ball, we're going to put it back in the bowl, cover it with a damp cloth, and then we're going to let it sit for just about a half an hour before we roll it out. So let's talk a little bit about the molds that you could use. As I mentioned, I'm going to be using these sprinkly molds. They're not necessarily any Christmas theme, but I love the images, especially this lady with a basket of geese on her head. And a little village. Birds. I'm not thinking, I probably won't use this one. It's too summery. Maybe just those four. But you could just as easily use any of your cookie molds. And these are some that would have been available in Edwardian times. Many of these were handmade. You can see that they were made of tin and soldered. Here's a little goose, a gingerbread person, gingerbread boy, a little dog, a tree. This is really a biscuit cutter, but it would make a very good ornament as well if you wanted to decorate it. Oh, and this one. Oh, that one's beautiful. I love that one with the little rabbits. And this beautiful basket of flowers. These aren't just necessarily just used for Christmas. You could use them really at any time of the year when you want that wonderful scent in the house. Now, if you want to buy these sprinkly molds, there are several companies online. I will put a link below where I got mine. This one isn't so great. This one was real cheap, $5.99 I think off of Amazon. I don't know that it's going to make that great of a mold. You can see the difference between this and these other really intricate ones. And something else that you might want to try are some of these rolling pins with designs on them. I'm not sure how well these will take. They're not very deeply carved. They're not deeply engraved, but it's worth a try if you've got some of those. Okay, once again we're going to dust our cutting board. Turn out our dough. Going to knead it just a little bit more. And if it seems too dry, you can add a couple drops of water. I think I am going to do that. Because we don't want it cracking. Now, we're going to roll it out. A little more cinnamon on the top so that the rolling pin does not get stuck to the dough. And then I'm going to roll it out to about 3/8 of an inch. Now I've dusted my mold also with cinnamon. In every little crack and crevice. You need to make sure you get all those little areas there if you want a really good image. I'm going to press it firmly in here. And then I'm going to lift it straight up. See what happens. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty cute. That's a very good image. I love it. Now let's try another one. Let's see, how about the little village? I think that's kind of Christmassy. And put some cinnamon in that. Shake it around. Okay. And press it in firmly. lift it straight up. Oh, that's pretty good too. You might have to blow some of that cinnamon out because it does get a little bit heavy in there in some ways. So we've got those two. This one's quite beautiful. Let's try this one. Now all of these molds, as I said, these are real sprinkly molds. And I have done an entire video, actually 2 videos, on making sprinkly cookies. So you might want to take a look at those. I get these from 2 different companies that produce these from antique molds. And I will list those down below in the description. There's so many beautiful patterns that you can get. That one's pretty exquisite. Press firmly. I'm going to cut these apart and lift straight up. These are turning out pretty good. Obviously with some of these you can just take a knife, cut them apart. And any excess dough, you're just going to roll it up, just as you would with cookie dough, and start all over again. You can let these air dry, or you can put them in the oven for about 3 hours on low heat, about 200 degrees. Oh, that one is a little weird. Now I'm just moving away the excess. And then I'm going to take a straw and I'm going to make a hole in the top of each one so that it can be hung. Like that. Carefully remove them. Blow off any excess. And these are pretty thick. These are pretty thick. That might be just a little bit too much. I think I could roll that a lot thinner. Gathered all the dough up and I re-rolled it. I made it thinner this time. I rolled it a little bit thinner this time. I still got a really good impression of everything. And I think the drying time will be a lot shorter now. Well, I managed to get a dozen little designs out of that little batch of dough. This is the last one, and then I had a little bit left right here. This is all I have left, which is great because I could probably manage to get one more small heart out of that, maybe just the center of it. So I'm going to let these dry now in the oven for about 3 hours. Or you can also air dry them. Also, you don't have to put the hole in the top. I think they would be just as sweet sitting in a bowl, not necessarily hanging. I took these out of the oven after about an hour because they were already getting pretty nice and hard. I think I'll let them air dry the rest of the way. Now, most of them have done a good job of keeping the image intact, but I was kind of unhappy with the baskets. So these can also be painted with acrylic paint. And I think I will be painting some of these, definitely, because it's having a hard time seeing the image of the flowers and the basket weave right here. So as soon as these are thoroughly dry, I think I will go ahead and paint several of these. This is how our cinnamon spice ornaments turned out. I painted just one, and I rather like it. What do you think? I used acrylic paints. I watered it down quite a bit, so it still has a nice old look to it. Do you prefer them painted, or do you prefer them simply embossed like this? I can't decide, so I think I'll probably do half and half. So this being a middle-class Edwardian home and a middle-class family, what might the lady of the house have served her Christmas teas and her Christmas dinners in? What kind of tableware might she have used? Well, highly likely that it could have been transferware. Transferware was actually introduced in the late 1700s, but has continued to be produced throughout these days. So we really have a wide variety of transferware here on the table. And I think any of you that collect antiques, you likely have at least one transferware cup, if not an entire set of dinnerware. So let's talk a little bit about the history of transferware and how it was produced. Before the 1780s, porcelain china was hand-painted, and it was expensive, a little more expensive than a working class or a middle class family could afford. And then, in the late 1700s, Miles Mason developed a technique on ironstone china of transferring these beautiful patterns, all sorts of intricate, beautiful patterns on this china. It was sturdy, everyday wear, perfect and affordable for a middle class or working class family. Now, this technique was patented by Miles Mason's son, Charles James Mason, in 1813. Now, this was a lot more durable than the porcelain china, because it was made from flint and slag and Cornish stone and clay, so it's heavier and much thicker. And as I said, it was made for everyday use. To create the intricate designs, a hand-engraved copper plate was created. Now, this plate was then printed. The design was printed on paper, and the paper was pressed down upon the plate or the cup or the object, which was to be decorated. And then the paper, when it was set, the paper was floated off in water. So this would have been set in the water, and the paper design would float off, and the remaining design would remain on the plate. The designs could also be burned off in the kiln. And what can you imagine? These hand-engraved, the copper plates, the original hand-engraved copper plates. Look at the intricacy of the designs on some of these plates. I think this is why these are so loved, because there is so much detail in each one of them. As you can see the bridge going by, you can see figures on the bridge, the horse, the rider, the castle in the background, all the little berries and flowers. There are so many wonderful, wonderful things on these plates. Now, pink transferware and red transferware, I think, are probably the most popular, although what I read was that blue willow was really the most popular transferware. Now, I don't have a lot of blue, but I'm going to show you some of the pieces that I do have here. It really is the blue and white that's the traditional transferware colors. And there was always a white background, and generally just two colors, either blue and white, red and white, brown and white. Sometimes you'll find green and white, and every once in a while, a new color could be introduced into the pattern. As you can see on this little creamer right here, we've got browns, but we've also got several other colors. Now, the other colors could have been added by hand or with another transfer. When I first started collecting transferware, or seeing transferware, I noticed on a lot of the designs and the patterns, you would see scenes that seemed to be coming out of the Orient or the Middle East. And I thought, for a very long time, I thought that these plates and cups and dishes must have been printed or created in China or Japan. But the idea of the Oriental scenes and the Middle Eastern scenes was because the artists were traveling throughout, leaving Europe and traveling throughout the world and painting images of these foreign, exotic places. And the Victorians at the time were just fascinated with foreign places outside of Europe. And that is why you see so many of this sort of a design on Transferware. Now, Blue Willow is a perfect example. It's one of the most popular patterns to collect, and all the scenes are very much of the Orient. More typical and what I prefer to collect are these country scenes. They're usually idyllic scenes of hunting or just beautiful designs. Coaches and carriages. Or very homey scenes, such as this plate. This one is from Currier and Ives. Now, how do you identify the transferware and the age of the transferware? Well, for one thing, most likely, there's going to be a stamp on the back. And this one is Johnson Brothers, Ironstone, and the name is Coaching Scenes. Now, you'll notice here that it said made in England, and this can also give you a hint as to the date of your transferware. Because in 1891, the Tariff Act, called the McKinley Tariff Act, was passed, and it required that the name of the country of origin be printed on the back of all the china that was imported into the United States. So if your plate says England on its mark, then it was likely made after 1891 for the U.S. market. Now, not all transferware was made in England. This piece, for example, is made in the United States, and it is actually restaurant transferware, because transferware is still being made to this day from old designs. This is a very, very durable plate because it really was restaurant ware, and this was printed by Syracuse in the United States. So it's very telling if you can look at the bottom of the design. This is very interesting transferware, I think, and kind of rare. This is the only piece I have like this, and this is called Blue Flow. This actually is supposed to be a little more valuable type of transferware, and it was introduced in the 1830s. The cobalt blue, as you can see, has sort of overflowed its lines so that it looks rather smudged and blurry. They thought that at first it was an accident, but then it was so beautiful that they began to do this deliberately for the market. And this piece really is so very, very different now. This piece has no markings on it whatsoever. So I do tend to believe that this piece is extremely old, but it's the only one that I have of this nature. But as beautiful and old as that is, I really do prefer the ones whose markings are so clear that you can really see all the beautiful images. I think my favorite color is pink transferware, and this is actually Mason's. So Mason's Vista. And Mason's, as I mentioned before, Miles Mason invented this technique of transferware. And so they were still going strong after that date. 100 years later, made in England. So this would have been created after 1893. But he patented the design for the transferware in 1813. And here you can see another idyllic scene with a castle in the background and the family here in the front. And what I love also about transferware is the fact that they're often, the designs are often on the inside of the cups as well. Here's a really beautiful example of some more modern transferware. The design is old, but these pieces, when I bought them, this was new transferware, probably printed in the 1990s or something like that. What I love about these are obviously the sheep and the goats on it. And this one does not have a country of origin on it. It simply has a stamp with two lions and a shield in the middle. The stamp and this mark would have had to represent some company. You have to do a little research on some of these because they don't give you the country of origin on the stamp. You've seen these many times before. These are little demitasse cups, also with an image on the inside. This is Shakespeare Land. I've used these in several videos, made in England, so this would have been after 1893. Now the oldest piece besides the blue flowware that I have on the table, I think I was told, don't know if this is true. This was sold to me as having been created between 1840 and 1860, but since it has no date on it, I have no idea. Now when I got it, it had a cracked handle, as you can see right here. But I really bought it for display, and it's a good thing because I had it sitting on the table. One day I picked it up and the entire bottom just fell off. A great big crack right across the bottom. I have repaired it. I'll put it back together again. I guess you can see it here, but I can never actually use it. And this one does not say made in England. It simply says Durbury, Davenport. And I did look this up, and it is quite old. But the beauty on this, I think, this one I think has a cow on it. Does it have a cow? No, I thought it had a cow. But just got the little village, the castle, and this man is fishing, and a mother and a child. I mean, I just think these are the original artwork is so beautiful that it really requires some examination for you to fully really appreciate this. But this would have been beautiful on an Edwardian table to serve tea with some of these beautiful cups. Let's look at some of these beautiful cups, because I would venture to say that some of you have some of these cups. This one is a beautiful oversized cup, and this was made Enoch Woods, English Scenery, Woods in England, once again printed and made in England. And another Enoch Woods, English Scenery, Woods and Sons, England. Now another great thing about Transferware, I think, is that you can mix and match it. It doesn't have to be the same pattern from the same company, because they all go beautifully together. This Transferware was made from Myatt Company, and it's also made in England. It's Queen's Transferware. So these 3 plates that I'm going to show you, they are absolutely from different companies and different patterns, but watch how beautifully they go together. So there we have this one. Now here we have another plate made from a completely different company. It's a different design, but what the colors have in common, we've got the brown Transferware, but we've also got color on this plate. So these other colors, the browns and reds of the foxes and the green in the trees and the pink in the background landscape, were either added by hand or added with another transfer. And I'm probably thinking another transfer. Now, to date this piece is pretty easy, because this piece says Royal Stafford, made in Burslem, the heart of the potteries in England, but it also says microwave and dishwasher safe. So we know this is a more modern piece of Transferware taken from an antique design. But it looks great with this plate. And on top of that, we have another piece of Transferware, also in different colors. It's got little acorns, it's got these beautiful little hairs. And this one is made by the Victorian English Pottery, established in 1819, microwave and dishwasher safe, and made in England. So once again, a modern rendition of an antique piece. And I think these 3 look beautiful together. So you really can take mismatched Transferware and combine them together, and they just go beautifully together. Here's another example. This is a design that may be familiar with you. This is called The Friendly Village by Johnson Brothers. Also an antique design, but made recently in the last 20 years. So there you have the mark on the back. But it really goes very well with this Heritage Hall Colonial Overhang Ironstone Transferware, also by Johnson Brothers. But it's a completely different design. But if you take them and put them together like this, they really are stunning. And of course, then you would want to put maybe a little bowl, or a teacup on top of it. We have a lovely example of brown Transferware. This is produced by Myatt Company and Sons, established in 1880. And this one also says made in England. And the accompanying pieces have added color. As you can see, that this is really a coffee pot. Now, because Transferware has been produced for such a long time, it's very easy to find, and I'm sure that many of you have your own sets of Transferware. Let us know in the comments below. I'd like to know what your favorite colors are, what patterns you have. This is the Old Curiosity Shop. This was printed in America, and I've talked about this particular set many times. Isn't that great? Look at that. Isn't that a great, great image? Seriously, love this. So you really can mix and match these pieces to your heart's content because they look so great together. So because this dinnerware has been produced for over 200 years, an Edwardian family could certainly have a set or 2 sets, or maybe 3 sets even, of Transferware to set a beautiful Christmas table, for Christmas tea, Christmas dinner, or luncheon. So we will probably be using the Transferware a lot in this series of videos about Edwardian Christmas. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode, episode 1 of the Edwardian Christmas. Next week, we're going to do something really fun. It's going to be a lot more glitzy and glamorous and fussy than these little ornaments were, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. So we'll see you next time in Hopalong Hollow for Edwardian Christmas Part 2. Bye-bye.